Only if you want this, the Apache told the bride who became his by an unexpected twist of fate. The morning sun rose slowly over the small frontier town, casting golden light over the dusty streets and wooden buildings. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of earth and smoke from chimneys. In one of the modest homes on the edge of town, a young woman was already awake. She moved quietly through the room, careful not to wake her younger siblings, who still slept under the warm blankets. Life had not been easy for her. After losing her parents several years ago, she had taken on the responsibility of running the household and tending to the small plot of land behind the house. Each day was a challenge, filled with chores and the constant worry of making ends meet. But she was strong and determined, refusing to let hardship define her. She dressed quickly in a simple cotton dress, tying her hair back with a faded ribbon, and stepped outside. The early sunlight warmed her face as she took a deep breath of the fresh morning air. There was a quiet peace to the world at this hour, the calm before the bustle of the town began. She walked along the narrow path to the well, carrying a bucket. Along the way, she greeted the few neighbors who were already starting their day. Her life was simple, predictable, and in many ways lonely. She often thought about what it would be like to share her life with someone, to have someone who understood her struggles and dreams. But that thought was always fleeting, pushed aside by the demands of daily life. Once she had drawn water and returned home, she set about preparing breakfast for her siblings. The smell of fresh bread and porridge filled the small kitchen, mixing with the scent of the morning air that drifted through the open window. She worked quietly, her mind wandering as she hummed a soft tune. Her life was filled with routine, yet she found comfort in the small acts of care she could provide. It was in these moments, doing the simplest tasks, that she felt a sense of control over her life. Despite everything she had lost, she had managed to create a safe space for herself and her family. Later that morning, she decided to travel into the town to fetch supplies. The general store was a short walk away, but the journey still took her through stretches of open land, where the wind whispered through tall grasses. She packed a small satchel with coins she had saved, tucking it securely under her arm. As she stepped out of the house, she noticed movement at the edge of the town, a figure standing just beyond the wooden fence that marked the town's boundary. He was a tall man, with strong features and an air of quiet confidence. His skin was sun-kissed, his dark eyes observing the world with a calm intensity. He wore the clothing of his people, practical and worn, yet carrying a sense of dignity and pride. Their eyes met briefly as she passed, and she felt a curious stir in her chest. There was something about him that was different from anyone she had ever met in town. He did not speak at first, only watching with a measured calm. She felt both wary and intrigued. For a moment, she imagined the stories people told about travelers, about the strangers who arrived with news or danger, and she wondered what his story might be. But before she could dwell on it, she continued on her way, focusing on her errands. At the general store, she exchanged greetings with the shopkeeper, a kindly man who always had a smile and a few words of advice. She selected flour, sugar, and some dried meat, carefully counting her coins as she paid. The routine of the shopping trip was familiar, yet she felt the memory of the man at the edge of town lingering in her mind. It was unusual for someone to command such attention without speaking, and she found herself glancing toward the horizon, half expecting to see him again. She shook her head, trying to focus on the task at hand. Life was already complicated enough without distractions from strangers. As she left the store, the streets had begun to fill with townsfolk going about their business. Children ran past, laughing and shouting, while merchants called out to advertise their goods. The noise was a sharp contrast to the quiet morning, and she navigated the crowd with practiced ease. On the outskirts of town, she noticed the man again. He had moved slightly, now standing closer to a cluster of trees that marked the boundary between the town and the open land. Their eyes met once more, and this time he gave a small nod of acknowledgement. She felt a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. There was a calm strength in his demeanor, and yet something in his gaze hinted at a depth she could not immediately understand. The path home took her past a narrow creek, where the water ran clear over smooth stones. She paused for a moment, letting the gentle sound of flowing water fill her ears. The world felt expansive here, a reminder of the life beyond the boundaries of her home and town. It was in moments like these that she felt both the weight of her responsibilities and the quiet longing for something more. As she straightened and continued along the path, she noticed that the man had moved again, now walking a parallel course a short distance away. He did not approach, yet his presence was undeniable. She wondered if he had been following her or if it was simply chance that their paths crossed so many times that morning. Her thoughts were interrupted when a sudden cry rang out from the town. A young child had wandered too close to a horse tied near the general store and had become frightened. She ran toward the sound, her instincts taking over. The man was already there, guiding the child away from danger with calm authority. Watching him handle the situation, she felt a mixture of relief and admiration. He did not boast or demand recognition. He simply acted, ensuring the child's safety. It was in this moment, brief as it was, that she began to see the man as someone more than a stranger. There was honor in his actions, a quiet strength that commanded respect without words. Once the child was safe, she approached him, her curiosity now stronger than caution. "Thank you," she said softly, not knowing if words could truly convey the gratitude she felt. He nodded, his expression unreadable but kind. "It is nothing," he replied in a calm voice. There was no boastfulness, no demand for acknowledgement, only sincerity. She studied his face, noticing the lines of experience and care etched subtly into his features. She realized that in this brief encounter, she had glimpsed a life lived with courage and respect for others. She continued home, her mind racing with thoughts of the man. Something about him stayed with her, a sense of connection that she could not easily explain. Back at the house, she set down her satchel and began preparing a simple lunch for her siblings. She moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, yet her mind wandered to the events of the morning. She wondered about the man's life, the stories he carried, and the reasons he had come to their small town. There was a curiosity she could not ignore, a pull toward understanding more about him and the life he led beyond the borders of her familiar world. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, she found herself stepping outside once more. The air was cooler now, and the sounds of the town had quieted. She walked toward the edge of the land where the trees met the open plains. There, as if waiting, stood the man. He did not approach, merely observing the fading light. She felt a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty, unsure why she was drawn to him. Yet something in her heart told her that this encounter was not mere chance. It was a moment that might change everything, though she did not yet understand how. He finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "Life has a way of leading us where we are meant to be," he said. There was no judgment, only a statement of truth. She listened, sensing that these words held weight beyond their simple meaning. For the first time that day, she felt the stirrings of possibility, a life that could be different, richer, and fuller than she had imagined. And though the evening air was cool and the shadows lengthened, there was a warmth in the moment, a quiet promise that fate might indeed have a hand in the story unfolding before her. As the stars began to appear in the sky, she returned home, her mind alive with thoughts and questions. Who was this man? Why did he seem to know something about her that even she had not realized? And what would happen if their paths crossed again? She did not have the answers, yet for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope, a sense that life might hold surprises beyond the hardships she had known. And in that quiet night, she allowed herself to imagine the possibilities, knowing that tomorrow and the days to come might bring changes she had never expected. The next morning, the bride woke to the familiar sound of birds singing and the soft rustle of leaves outside her window. The air was warmer now, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers from the meadows surrounding her home. She moved quietly through the house, mindful not to disturb her siblings, who still slept peacefully under the covers. Even though her life was filled with routine chores and responsibilities, she felt a quiet excitement that she could not explain. Her thoughts drifted to the man she had met the day before, the Apache who had appeared so suddenly and then vanished as quietly. She carried on with her morning tasks, fetching water and tending to the small garden behind the house. Each movement felt automatic, but her mind remained elsewhere. She imagined what it would be like to speak to him again, to understand who he was and why his presence had left such a deep impression. Though she tried to push the thought away, it lingered stubbornly, like a persistent whisper in her heart. By mid-morning, she decided to take a short walk toward the town, hoping to distract herself with errands and the familiar rhythm of the streets. As she walked along the path, she noticed the man again, standing near the edge of the trees just outside the town. He was calm as always, his posture relaxed yet alert. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. She slowed her steps, uncertain if she should approach or keep her distance. Then, with a quiet nod, he acknowledged her presence. She felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity, but also a sense of trust she could not explain. Something about his demeanor made her feel safe, as if he understood the world in ways that others did not. She approached cautiously, keeping her voice soft. "Good morning," she said. He responded with a simple morning, and for a while they stood in silence, watching the wind move through the tall grasses. The stillness between them was not uncomfortable. Instead, it was filled with an unspoken understanding. She felt as though she could share her thoughts with him without judgment, and that feeling was rare in her life. After a few moments he spoke, his voice steady and calm. "You walk with purpose," he observed. "Your life carries weight, yet you move with care." She smiled faintly, surprised that he had noticed so much from such a brief observation. "I have responsibilities," she replied softly. "Life doesn't wait for anyone." He nodded as if he understood completely. There was a quiet respect in the way he listened, a patience that made her feel heard in a way she rarely did. Over the next few days, their paths continued to cross. Sometimes it was chance, a shared errand, a moment at the edge of town, but each encounter built upon the last. They began to speak more, sharing small stories about their lives. She learned that he was a man of quiet strength and integrity, deeply connected to his family and community. He had seen much in his life, faced challenges that had shaped him, and carried himself with a calm dignity that was impossible to ignore. In return, she shared pieces of her own story, her family, her responsibilities, and the hardships she had endured. With each conversation, a bridge of trust and understanding grew between them, subtle yet unbreakable. One afternoon, while gathering herbs near the edge of the forest, they encountered a sudden danger. A small fire had started along the dry grasses, and the wind was spreading it quickly toward the path they were on. Panic rose in her chest, but the Apache remained calm. He took her hand and guided her toward a safe area, moving with precision and focus. Together, they helped contain the fire until it was no longer a threat, working seamlessly as a team. The experience left her breathless, her heart pounding, but also filled with a deep admiration for his courage and composure. After the fire was under control, they paused to catch their breath. She looked at him with gratitude and wonder. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she admitted, her voice soft. He simply nodded, his eyes meeting hers with quiet understanding. "We each have a part to play," he said. "Sometimes it is fate that brings people together, but it is our choices that define what we do." His words lingered in her mind long after they returned to the town. Life in the town continued, but now she felt a subtle change within herself. Her interactions with him had stirred feelings she had long suppressed, curiosity, hope, and a cautious sense of connection. She found herself looking forward to their meetings, to the moments when the world seemed to pause and the two of them could simply be present together. Yet, even with this growing bond, she remained wary. Life had taught her caution, and she knew that trust was something earned, not given lightly. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky and painted the horizon with shades of pink and gold, she walked toward the edge of the town once more. The Apache was there, waiting as if he had known she would come. He greeted her with a gentle nod, and they walked together along the path that bordered the open plains. The world around them was quiet, the only sounds the distant call of birds and the rustling of the grass. They spoke of simple things at first, the weather, the work of the town, and the rhythms of daily life. Yet slowly their conversation deepened. He spoke of the values of his people, the importance of family, and the lessons he had learned through hardship and resilience. She listened, fascinated by his perspective and the wisdom behind his words. In turn, she shared her dreams, her hopes for a life filled with purpose and connection, and the fears that sometimes kept her awake at night. With each exchange, the bond between them grew stronger, built on mutual respect and understanding rather than expectation or obligation. Days turned into weeks, and their friendship became a constant in her life. She began to trust him not only with her safety, but with her thoughts and feelings. He had become a source of stability in a world that often felt unpredictable. and his presence brought a quiet comfort she had not realized she needed. She found herself smiling more, laughing at small jokes, and feeling a sense of ease she had long forgotten. The town began to notice the change as well. Neighbors commented on the way she carried herself, noting a newfound confidence and serenity. One afternoon, a messenger arrived in town with troubling news. A dispute had arisen at a nearby settlement, and tensions threatened to spill over into the town. Many of the townsfolk were anxious, unsure how to respond. She felt a knot of worry in her stomach, knowing that any conflict could bring danger or hardship. The Apache, sensing the tension, offered to accompany her to assess the situation and provide support. She hesitated for a moment, aware of the risks, but something in his calm demeanor reassured her. Together, they set out toward the neighboring settlement, prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Along the way, they encountered small signs of unease, smoke in the distance, hurried travelers moving along the paths, and the tense expressions of those they passed. Yet through it all, he remained steady, offering guidance and reassurance. She found herself relying on his judgment, trusting his experience and perspective. By the time they reached the settlement, she understood that he was more than just a protector. He was a partner, someone who could navigate danger with composure and integrity. The events of the day unfolded quickly. A misunderstanding between two groups threatened to escalate into violence, but with careful negotiation and a display of calm authority, the Apache helped prevent the situation from spiraling out of control. She watched in awe as he spoke with respect, patience, and clarity, diffusing tension where others might have faltered. By the end of the day, what could have been a dangerous conflict was resolved peacefully. The townsfolk and settlers alike expressed gratitude, many impressed by the man who had stepped forward with such wisdom and courage. As they returned to their own town that evening, the bride felt a new depth to her feelings. She realized that her connection with him was more than curiosity or admiration. It was respect, trust, and a growing sense of attachment. She understood that life had brought them together not by chance alone, but through moments that revealed character, strength, and integrity. She also recognized that this bond carried responsibility and choice, and that she would need to decide how to move forward with the awareness and care that had guided her life thus far. That night, as she lay in bed and reflected on the day, she felt a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. She thought of the challenges they had faced together, the trust that had grown between them, and the sense of possibility that lingered in her heart. Though the future remained unknown, she felt a quiet confidence that whatever happened next, she would face it with courage and clarity. And in that moment, she understood that life sometimes offered unexpected gifts, moments of connection that could transform ordinary days into memories that would last a lifetime. The morning air was cool and crisp as the bride stepped outside, the sun just beginning to rise above. The horizon. She carried a small basket with bread and supplies she had prepared for her family. The town was slowly waking, the streets quiet except for a few early risers tending to their chores. Her mind was not on the tasks ahead, however. It was on the Apache, whose presence had become a steady and reassuring part of her life. Over the past weeks, they had grown closer, their paths crossing again and again, always at the right moment. She could not deny the bond that had formed, and she found herself wondering how it would evolve if given the chance. As she walked toward the market, she noticed movement at the edge of town. There he was, the Apache, standing among the trees that marked the boundary between the town and the open plains. Their eyes met, and she felt the familiar mix of curiosity and comfort. He gave a small nod, as if acknowledging an unspoken understanding between them. She slowed her pace, feeling the pull of connection stronger than ever. For the first time, she felt as though fate had led her to someone who understood more than her words could explain. They walked together through the town, greeting neighbors and merchants along the way. People had begun to notice the quiet companionship between them, though no one interfered. There was a sense of respect in how the townsfolk observed them, recognizing the Apache's calm dignity and the bride's poise. They moved with ease, speaking of ordinary things at first, the weather, the work ahead, the state of the market. But beneath the surface, there was an unspoken understanding, a growing awareness of each other's strength and character. By midday, news arrived that a crisis had struck a nearby settlement. A group of travelers had been stranded on the plains after a sudden storm, their wagons overturned and supplies scattered. Panic had begun to spread, and the townsfolk were unsure how to respond. The bride felt a knot in her stomach. She knew the dangers of the plains, the sudden changes in weather, and the unpredictable nature of travel. Yet when the Apache stepped forward calmly, offering to help, she felt a quiet reassurance that everything would be managed with care. They set out quickly, following the path toward the plains. Along the way, the bride observed his movements, each step deliberate, each gesture precise. He had an uncanny ability to read the terrain, noticing details others might overlook. When they reached the stranded travelers, it was clear that immediate action was needed. Some were injured, others frightened and confused. Supplies had been scattered by the storm, and the wagons had suffered damage that threatened to halt their journey entirely. The Apache quickly assessed the situation, directing the travelers with calm authority. He assigned tasks, encouraged cooperation, and ensured that the injured were tended to first. The bride followed his lead, helping where she could, offering comfort and assisting with the distribution of food and water. She was impressed by his patience and clarity, how he remained composed despite the chaos. She realized that the strength she had admired in him was not just physical. It was his ability to remain steady, to inspire confidence, and to act with wisdom when others might panic. As they worked, the storm clouds that had caused the trouble began to break, revealing a pale afternoon sun. The travelers, now reassured and organized, began to recover their spirits. Children clung to their parents, frightened but safe, while the adults thanked the Apache for his guidance. She watched him, noting the respect in the way the travelers followed his instructions, the trust they placed in him without hesitation. It was a humbling sight, and she felt her admiration deepen into something stronger, more profound. After the immediate danger had passed, the bride and the Apache walked to the edge of the plains to rest. The wind whispered through the tall grasses, carrying the scent of damp earth and the faint aroma of wildflowers. For a moment the world felt still, and she allowed herself to breathe deeply, feeling the relief of the day's work settling in her chest. He turned to her, his eyes steady and calm. "You acted well today," he said simply. "You were patient, strong, and caring. Many would have faltered under such pressure." She felt a flush of warmth at his words, a mix of pride and gratitude. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the plains, and the bride realized that it was time to return to the town. As they walked back, a sudden shout rang out from behind them. A young traveler had slipped near a rocky incline, falling and twisting his ankle. The bride's heart leapt, but the Apache acted immediately, guiding her to assist without panicking. They worked together, ensuring the injured man was supported and moved to safety. Each moment reinforced the trust she had developed in him, the understanding that he would act decisively and with care when needed. By the time they returned to town, the day had grown late, and the streets were quiet once again. The travelers had moved on, carrying their supplies and gratitude with them, leaving only memories of the day's events. The bride felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, her thoughts racing as she reflected on what had happened. She realized that her feelings for the Apache were no longer simply admiration. They were respect, trust, and a quiet longing she could not yet define. She also understood that their bond had been strengthened not just by circumstance, but by the way they had faced challenges together, side by side. That evening, as she sat by the fire in her home, she thought about the events of the day. The images of the plains, the travelers, and the Apache's calm authority played repeatedly in her mind. She realized that life had a way of bringing people together through moments that tested their character and courage. And in that realization, she felt a deep sense of connection, as though fate had indeed placed them together for reasons beyond her understanding. The next morning, news came that another challenge awaited them. A group of traders had reported a band of wild animals near a frequently traveled path, making it dangerous for anyone to pass. The town's leaders were unsure how to respond, worried for the safety of those who might travel the road. Without hesitation, the Apache offered to help assess the situation, and the bride, knowing the risk, insisted on accompanying him. She trusted him completely, confident in his judgment and his ability to guide them through any danger. As they approached the path, they spotted signs of the animals, a broken branch here, footprints there. The Apache moved carefully, reading the terrain and noting patterns in the environment. He instructed her to stay behind him as they advanced, explaining the safest route and how to remain calm in case the animals appeared. The bride followed his lead, amazed by his knowledge and composure. When the animals finally came into view, she saw that they were not aggressive, only startled and wary of intruders. The Apache guided them away safely, ensuring that no harm came to the travelers who would later pass through the area. By the time they returned to town, the bride was exhausted but exhilarated. Each challenge they faced together strengthened the trust and bond between them. She had come to understand that courage was not just in facing danger. It was in remaining calm, thoughtful, and compassionate even in the most difficult moments. And in the Apache, she saw a partner who embodied these qualities fully, someone whose presence brought stability and reassurance in a world often unpredictable and harsh. That night, as she lay in bed, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few short weeks. The Apache had become more than a figure of curiosity. He was a source of strength, guidance, and comfort. She realized that their growing connection was not based on chance alone, but on the choices they had made together, the trust they had built, and the courage they had shown in the face of adversity. She thought of the words he had spoken long ago. Life has a way of leading us where we are meant to be. She now understood the truth in them. Fate had brought them together, yes, but it was their actions, their integrity, and their willingness to face challenges side by side that had forged a real bond. And in the quiet of the night, she allowed herself to hope, for safety, for companionship, and perhaps for something more profound that she had not yet dared to name. The days that followed continued in a similar rhythm. They encountered small challenges, aided those in need, and grew closer through shared experiences. The bride came to understand the depth of his character, not just through words, but through action, through the way he treated others, and the respect he carried for life and community. She found herself learning from him, adopting some of his calm patience and thoughtful approach to problem-solving. And though they spoke of many things, there were still unspoken feelings, quietly acknowledged in glances, in moments of shared laughter, and in the steady presence that seemed to comfort her without needing words. It was in one of these quiet moments, as they walked along the path toward the edge of town, that a subtle tension entered the air. A messenger arrived with urgent news. A traveler in a distant settlement had been injured and required immediate assistance. The town was unsure how to respond quickly enough. The Apache, sensing the need, prepared to leave immediately, and without hesitation, the bride insisted on accompanying him. She knew that by his side she could make a difference. Together, they mounted their horses and rode toward the distant settlement, ready to face whatever awaited them. The sun had barely risen when the bride awoke, her mind restless with thoughts of the journey they had taken the day before. The ride to the distant settlement had been exhausting, yet rewarding. She had seen the strength, courage, and calm wisdom of the Apache in action once again, and her admiration for him had deepened into something far more complex. She could no longer deny that he had become a central part of her life, someone she looked to not only for guidance and protection, but also for understanding. Yet even as she acknowledged her feelings, a sense of uncertainty lingered. She had never been in a position like this before, and the weight of choice pressed heavily on her heart. After completing her morning chores, she set out along the familiar path toward the edge of town, carrying a small basket of bread and water for herself. The streets were quiet, the townsfolk still stirring from sleep. As she walked, she noticed him waiting at the edge of the trees as if he had known she would come. Their eyes met, and in that simple glance, 1,000 words seemed to pass between them. She felt a mixture of anticipation, hope, and nervousness. Today was the day she realized that her life could change forever, depending on the decision she was about to make. They walked together in silence for a while, the only sounds being the rustling of the grass and the distant calls of birds. Eventually, he spoke, his voice calm and steady. "There are moments in life when choice is given, not demanded," he said. "You are free to decide your path, and no one can take that away from you." She nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. For the first time, she felt the weight of her own power to choose, to accept, or to step back. It was a responsibility that filled her with both courage and fear. Their conversation turned to the events that had brought them together, the chance encounters, the dangers they had faced, and the shared challenges that had tested their strength. He spoke of honor, integrity, and the importance of living in alignment with one's values. She listened intently, recognizing that every word he spoke carried truth and wisdom, the kind that only comes from lived experience. She felt a quiet respect for him, deeper than anything she had known before, and a sense of trust that went beyond words. As they walked, they came across a small stream, its clear water reflecting the morning sun. The Apache stopped, gesturing for her to sit on a nearby rock. He did the same, and for a few moments they simply watched the water flow. The stillness was comforting, a rare pause in lives often filled with movement and unpredictability. She thought of her family, her home, and the life she had built for herself. And yet she also thought of him, the calm strength he brought, and the sense of partnership that had grown between them. He turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with quiet sincerity. "I have offered you a path, but the choice is yours alone," he said softly. "You are free to accept or to decline. I will respect your decision either way." She felt a lump in her throat, realizing that this was the moment she had been both anticipating and dreading. The decision before her was not simple. It was not only about her feelings for him, but also about stepping into a life that would be unfamiliar, challenging, and deeply different from what she had known. Her mind wandered back to the weeks they had spent together, the moments of laughter, the shared tasks, the dangers they had faced side by side. She remembered the travelers they had helped, the fire they had contained, and the animals they had guided safely away. Each moment had revealed the depth of his character and the trustworthiness of his heart. She felt a growing certainty that her life with him, while unpredictable, would also be filled with honesty, respect, and care. Yet, doubts still lingered. She thought of the town, of the neighbors and family who might question her choice. She thought of the expectations she had carried her entire life, the belief that security and familiarity were the safest paths. But with each reflection, she realized that these fears were not enough to outweigh the connection she felt with him, the sense of understanding and partnership that had grown through shared experience. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but soft. I want this," she said, her heart racing. "I want to choose this life with you because I trust you and because I feel that we can face the future together." The Apache's eyes softened, and a quiet smile appeared on his face. "Then we walk this path together," he said simply. There was no rush, no declaration beyond the calm acceptance of their shared choice. The words were enough. In that moment, the decision was mutual, built on trust, understanding, and a recognition of each other's character. They walked back toward the town, their pace unhurried, each step a reflection of their shared decision. Along the way, they spoke of practical matters, the adjustments they would need to make, the ways in which their lives would intertwine, and the responsibilities they would share. She realized that love and partnership were not merely about feelings, but also about commitment, respect, and the willingness to face challenges together. The Apache's presence was reassuring, a reminder that the journey ahead would not be traveled alone. When they reached the town, some neighbors had begun their daily routines. They noticed the quiet companionship between the bride and the Apache, but no one interfered. There was a growing sense of respect in the way the townsfolk observed them, recognizing the sincerity and integrity of their bond. For the bride, this was comforting. She understood that their choice, though unconventional to some, was built on honesty, mutual respect, and the careful decisions that had guided both of their lives. That afternoon, they returned to her home, where her younger siblings were curious but unafraid. The bride took a moment to explain, in gentle terms, that the Apache would become a part of their lives, not as an authority or a stranger, but as a partner, a protector, and a friend. She saw in her siblings' eyes a mixture of curiosity and acceptance, a reflection of the trust they had in her judgment. She felt a sense of relief, knowing that this new chapter in her life could begin with openness and understanding. Over the next few days, she and the Apache worked together to integrate their lives. They repaired fences, prepared meals, and tended to the small garden behind the house. Each task became an opportunity to learn from one another, to share knowledge, and to strengthen the bond that had brought them together. She admired the way he approached every challenge with calm determination, and he appreciated her insight, care, and dedication. Their partnership was not perfect, but it was real, built on shared effort and mutual respect. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, they sat together on a small hill overlooking the town. The bride reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from the first chance encounter to the dangers they had faced, and finally to the choice she had made. She realized that life was unpredictable, filled with twists and turns, yet it was in these moments of uncertainty that true connection and understanding could be found. The Apache sat beside her quietly, his presence steady and reassuring. They did not need words to convey their understanding. It was present in the calm, in the trust, and in the shared silence. The bride thought of the phrase he had once said, "Only if you want this." She understood its meaning now more fully than ever. It was not just about consent. It was about respect, choice, and the recognition of each person's agency. He had offered her a path, but he had never demanded it. And in choosing it, she had embraced not only him, but also her own courage, her ability to make decisions, and her willingness to step into the unknown with trust. As the stars began to appear in the sky, she felt a quiet joy settle over her. She knew that the road ahead would not always be easy. Life would continue to present challenges, both expected and unforeseen. But she also knew that with the Apache by her side, she could face whatever came with confidence and courage. They had built a bond that was grounded not in fear or obligation, but in mutual respect, trust, and understanding. A bond that could weather the trials of life and grow stronger with time. That night, as they returned to the house, the bride felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She understood that love was not merely about feelings or circumstance. It was about choice, respect, and shared responsibility. She had chosen to walk this path, and in doing so, she had embraced a life filled with honesty, courage, and companionship. And as she drifted off to sleep, she allowed herself to imagine the future, knowing that whatever it held, it would be faced together, side by side, with trust, respect, and unwavering support. The morning light filtered softly through the small windows of the bride's home. Birds sang in the trees, and the gentle rustle of leaves carried the promise of a new day. Life had changed in the weeks since she had chosen to walk beside the Apache, yet the change felt natural, almost inevitable. The bond they had formed had grown deeper with each passing day, strengthened by shared experiences, trust, and understanding. She moved through her morning chores with a sense of ease she had not felt before, aware that her life was no longer hers alone, but a shared path with someone she respected and cared for deeply. The Apache joined her in the garden, tending to the small plot of vegetables they had nurtured together. He worked quietly, his movements deliberate and careful, his presence a comforting constant. She watched him for a moment, noticing the way the sunlight caught his features, highlighting the calm strength she had come to rely on. She realized that this daily rhythm, these small acts of work and care, had become a foundation for something much larger: partnership, understanding, and a shared life built on mutual respect. After breakfast, they walked together to the town. Along the way, they greeted neighbors and friends, some of whom had been curious about their relationship. Their presence, calm and natural, seemed to settle any doubts or questions. People began to see the couple as a team, a partnership based on honesty and integrity rather than expectation or tradition. The bride felt a quiet satisfaction in this. She had stepped into a life that was unconventional in some eyes, but one that felt true and meaningful to her. The Apache's steady presence reassured her that this path was right, not because it was easy, but because it was genuine. Throughout the day, they faced small challenges that life in the frontier always presented. A fence needed repair, a neighbor required help with a stubborn mule, and a storm threatened to sweep through the fields later in the afternoon. Each situation was met calmly, with the bride and the Apache working together seamlessly. She had come to rely on his guidance, yet she also recognized her own strength and capability, realizing that their partnership allowed each of them to shine in different ways. She felt a quiet pride in herself, knowing that she could contribute, protect, and care not as a passive participant, but as an equal partner. In the afternoon, the bride received news from a nearby settlement. A family traveling to the town had lost their supplies in a sudden storm and would need help to continue safely. Without hesitation, the Apache suggested that they gather what was necessary and ride to assist. The bride agreed, feeling a familiar excitement mixed with determination. Their journeys together had shown her the value of courage, resourcefulness, and care. She knew that helping others, protecting those in need, and acting with integrity were not just responsibilities but opportunities to live a life that mattered. As they rode toward the settlement, the bride noticed the Apache's keen awareness of the land. He pointed out safe paths, warned her of slippery terrain, and guided her calmly through obstacles. She felt a deep sense of trust in him, a certainty that he would lead with wisdom and care. Yet she also recognized her own role in these moments, assisting when needed, making decisions, and supporting those they encountered. The ride was not without its challenges: fallen branches, uneven ground, and frightened animals. But together they navigated each situation successfully, strengthening their bond further with every shared experience. When they reached the settlement, they found the family struggling to manage their belongings and care for small children. The bride and the Apache worked quickly, distributing supplies, stabilizing the wagons, and offering reassurance to the frightened family. She felt a rush of satisfaction in her heart, knowing that she was capable of providing comfort, organization, and protection. The Apache's calm presence guided her, yet she realized that her own courage and careful judgment were equally important. By the time the family was ready to continue their journey safely, both the bride and the Apache felt a quiet pride in their ability to act together, to meet challenges with care, and to provide safety and hope to others. On the ride back, the bride and the Apache rode in silence, the weight of the day settling over them. She reflected on how much her life had changed in such a short time, the hardships she had endured, the challenges she had faced, and the unexpected bond that had grown between them. She realized that this bond was built not on luck or chance alone, but on the choices they had made together, the trust they had placed in one another, and the shared experiences that had revealed character, integrity, and heart. Back in town, they continued their daily tasks, repairing fences, preparing meals, and tending to the small garden. Their life together had become a rhythm, a pattern of work, care, and shared moments that strengthened their connection. The bride found joy in the small details: the way the Apache noticed when a plant needed water, the quiet strength he brought to every task, and the gentle encouragement he offered when she took the lead. She realized that partnership was not about grand gestures alone, but about the consistent presence, support, and respect shown in the everyday moments of life. Evenings were now their time to reflect, talk, and enjoy the quiet beauty of the town and surrounding land. They often sat on the small hill overlooking the town, watching the sun set in hues of gold and pink. The bride felt a deep sense of peace in these moments, a recognition that life was richer when shared with someone who understood, respected, and cared for her. She thought of her family, of the responsibilities she had carried alone for so long, and of the joy she now felt in knowing that she was not alone. Their conversations turned to the future: plans for the farm, ways to support the community, and hopes for their shared life. The bride realized that partnership meant compromise, understanding, and shared vision. They spoke of values, dreams, and goals, ensuring that their paths aligned not only in affection but in purpose. She felt a growing excitement at the possibilities, knowing that life would continue to challenge them, but that together they could face whatever came with courage, care, and mutual respect. As the weeks turned into months, the town began to see the couple as a model of partnership and integrity. Their lives were intertwined not just by affection, but by shared action, responsibility, and understanding. The bride felt a quiet pride in the way they were accepted, not because they fit the traditional mold, but because their bond was genuine, built on trust, respect, and demonstrated through consistent care and integrity. One evening, after a long day of work and assisting a neighboring family with repairs, they returned home to find the town quiet under the soft glow of the setting sun. They sat together outside, the cool evening air carrying the scent of grass and flowers. She rested her head lightly on his shoulder, feeling a sense of calm and contentment that she had never known before. Life had brought her to this unexpected place, a partnership that was not just about love but about trust, shared responsibility, and the quiet joy of companionship. She thought about the words he had spoken long ago: "Only if you want this." She understood the depth of their meaning now. The choice had been hers, freely given and fully considered. And in choosing to walk this path with him, she had embraced not only their bond, but also her own strength, courage, and ability to step into a life filled with uncertainty, hope, and trust. She realized that the power of choice had brought her freedom, joy, and a sense of belonging she had not imagined possible. Days continued to flow with the rhythm of shared life, work, care, challenges, and quiet moments of reflection. They faced difficulties together, from unpredictable weather to the occasional illness in the town, yet each challenge strengthened their bond. The bride recognized that life would always be unpredictable, but the Apache's calm strength and her own courage ensured that they could meet each moment with resilience and hope. One afternoon, while tending to the small garden, the bride reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the first encounter at the edge of town, the small moments of connection, the challenges they had faced together, and the choice she had made. Every memory reinforced her sense of gratitude and understanding, that life had a way of guiding people together, and that true partnership was built not on chance alone, but on trust, respect, and shared courage. As the sun set, they walked to the hill overlooking the town once more. The sky was painted in deep oranges and purples, and the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. They sat together in quiet companionship, the gentle warmth of trust and understanding surrounding them. She felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that life, with all its unpredictability, could be beautiful and meaningful when shared with someone who understood and respected her fully. In the quiet moments, she reflected on the lessons she had learned about courage, choice, trust, and the value of integrity. She realized that life was not just about surviving, but about embracing opportunities for connection, kindness, and shared purpose. And she knew that by choosing this life with the Apache, she had embraced all of these things, building a foundation that could support whatever the future might bring. The stars twinkled above as they walked back home, hand in hand, a quiet smile shared between them. The journey that had begun with a chance encounter had grown into a life filled with trust, partnership, and love. They had faced challenges, made choices, and built a bond that was unshakable. And in the calm of the night, the bride felt a sense of fulfillment and hope, knowing that life, though unpredictable, could be faced with courage, understanding, and a companion by her side.